Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm your host, Randy Shabilo. Our guest today is Marie Agioritis, who's a mother in Saskatoon that is doing some amazing things, educating a lot of the parents and grandparents and the wider community about drug use in Saskatoon. As always, we'd like to connect with you.
Tweet us at Shaw TV Saskatoon. Find us on Facebook or email shawtvconnect@shaw.ca. You can also watch previous interviews on Shaw TV's YouTube channel at youtube.com/Shaw TV Saskatoon.
Parenting and grandparenting over the years has continued to evolve, and life on the street takes matters into the homes of many families around the world, and here in Saskatoon, we're not an island. And to that degree, I've asked Marie Agioritis to come by and give us a little bit of her experience of what life is like in Saskatoon and raising a family, and some of the things that happened to her based on her life experience with her son Kelly. So Marie, I want to thank you first of all for making time and coming to hear us talk about this today. Tell us a bit about yourself and your family situation that we had heard about in the news so far.
Well, thank you, Randy, for giving me some of your time today too. Number one, Saskatoon is a beautiful city, and any of our experiences aren't unique. However, aren't unique in the tragedy of our family's history in the last few years anyhow. But I also must say that neither is our wonderful experiences in this city, so I want to make sure everybody understands it's a great city to grow up in for our kids. However, we were ill prepared for the generation of drugs that hit my kids in high school. There's 5 children in our school, in our family. My husband and I have two families blended together. Our oldest 3 ran into drug troubles in probably the start of grade 10. By the time our oldest was 18, she had quit all drugs, all alcohol. She's substance and alcohol free now. And our boy, who was 19, he was a great kid, doing really, really well in school. And our boy, who's now 23, he, in high school, was the Defensive Player of the Year 3 years running at Holy Cross. Great athlete, great academic kid. By the time he graduated, he owned a condo, he had a car, and he had a job with the city of Saskatoon. And by October of that year, it was all gone. And it was gone simply because he had a buddy who'd been in a car accident. And that young man tragically lost his best friend in the accident and had been severely injured. He was given a prescription of Dilaudid and OxyContin and a plethora of other opiates for his pain. And as a young man, what he chose to do was share them with his friends. At that time, there seemed to be the surgence of kids using prescription drugs as a method to get high or for recreation. We didn't really have the education out there as parents to know that we should sit down and talk to our kids about recreational pharmaceuticals. We talked to our kids about pot because that was our experience growing up. We talked to our kids about alcohol. That was our experience growing up. Little did I know that they needed to have a discussion about how opiates attached themselves to their brains in a very short period of time. Anyhow, Cale started to use them as a party drug. And by the time he was 6 months in, he was done, completely done. That led to about a 3 or 4 year period of addiction, with a number of his friends also getting addicted. And we sent him away to treatment, a very expensive treatment, because treatment wasn't available in Saskatchewan at the time that in a timely enough manner. So we sent him away for 3 months. He came back clean, relapsed 2 weeks later. He overdosed, and we near lost him. He overdosed probably 6 to 8 times, and we came very close to losing him, I know for sure twice, where he was done. However, emergency came, and first responders, thank heaven, brought Cale back to life. Anyhow, I went to sleep a lot of nights wondering if I was going to wake up one child less. I'd planned his funeral in my head, and if you talk to a lot of moms in my situation, you do that very thing. In January of 2015, the beginning of the year, the balance of my family decided to head to Alberta for a ski vacation. My 19-year-old son, Kelly, wanted to come, and he worked at the keg. We said, no, son, you have a shift that day. And he said, well, I'm going to quit. And I said, no, you can't quit your job. It's the first time we ever left him home alone. We said, we'll give you an opportunity to prove yourself, because our experience with our kids had not been great, so we were very, very careful. So Kelly's, great, no parties, I'll be a good guy. Talked to him on the Friday night while we were in Calgary. Saturday morning was my husband's birthday. I walked in the door at 10:30 to my phone ringing, and it was his father screaming in the phone, he's dead, he's dead. And I assumed right away Cale had died. He'd finally been successful in his efforts in addiction to die. No, it wasn't Cale, it was Kelly, my 19-year-old. Kelly had gone the night before and secured a single pill, and that pill was fentanyl, disguised, OxyContin rather, disguised as fentanyl. And I know we've heard about them on the streets, and he had done a half of the pill the night before and was sent home with the other half of the pill, and he took it in the morning at about 10 o'clock. And it had the predominant amount of the fentanyl in that half of the pill, and it was enough to kill him. He laid down on the sofa and he died within about 25 minutes. And in fact, the concentration of the drug in his blood was small enough that it really wouldn't have killed most people. But as kids don't know, that your body metabolizes things different. All of our bodies metabolize things different. Kelly's had a high rate of metabolizing, and it killed him. He had, and also the other part of it is that the boy that was with him panicked and didn't call 911, fearful that, I suspect, because we've never been able to secure a straight answer, fearful that the fact there were drugs in place was going to be enough to get him in trouble with the law. And I think he was in disbelief that Kelly was actually dying, who was his best friend. Anyhow, he did die. And it was absolutely devastating, because for what we'd already gone through and what he had seen as a family, what we'd gone through, I could not believe that this would have happened to him. What I learned from that point, number one, is my son Cale made a very concerted effort to become clean. He ended up going on to medically assisted recovery, which is methadone. There's another drug called Suboxone that kids can go on, or family, or anybody can go on if they're struggling with opiate addiction. Cale ended up going on methadone, and I'm proud to say, with that assistance, he's clean today and he's functioning well. A lot of ways to go, because those drugs do a lot of damage. However, our life without Kelly has been incredibly difficult. Kelly was a sweet, sweet kid, a comedian. Everybody loved him. There was almost 900 people at his funeral. He was a great guy. And really the point to all that is that it can be your child. It can be anybody's child. We have a good, solid family, a good foundation, a lot of support from grandparents, brothers, uncles, cousins, family dinners, sports. Our kids never went without anything. But what I learned in the time that Kelly died, there were 2, 3, 4, 5 other kids in our neighborhood that died in that 6-month period, and we live over by the university. You don't hear about that stuff on the news. It's very, very difficult for a family to deal with the death and come out in the public to talk about it. But it was rampant. And these were the ones that were dying. We're not mentioning the ones that actually made it. And since that time, these drugs have taken over a lot of kids in our community.
Maybe just back up and tell us a bit about it. It's a recreational type of pill, for instance. If it's a social environment, years ago people would have a drink or maybe take a Mickey out of Dad's cabinet and do that, but now this is going to take us in a different direction in terms of the social and the high.
Well, number one, I don't think there's a single parent out there that would have thought for a second that prescription drugs could be used recreationally. Sure. And I really hate to put that word in front of it, although I do. It shouldn't be recreational. It's destructive. And there's no moderation in it. You can't go out and say, okay, everything in moderation, kids. No, there's no moderation in it. Most often these prescription drugs were given for good reason. However, there was a real push in the market, and I've done I'm not just talking what I think, it's what I've read and what I know, is there was a lot of irresponsible prescribing of the drugs over the years, and lots of times it was not known. It was well intended prescribing. The irresponsibility came in that there would be more pills than necessary for whomever it was that got them to need, that the leftovers were in the cupboard. And suddenly kids began to realize that I could get a pretty cool high. And what this high for me has been described as wrapping yourself in a warm blanket. And you just get this incredibly, wonderfully comfortable, pleasant feeling like nothing you've ever felt. And really, opiates in their design should really be something we only use for end-of-life drugs, you know, or cancer patients or somebody with severe pain. They're not for toothaches, and they should never be. Take your Tylenols and Advils. We're all going to live through that. So the kids were starting to use them for that reason. Then there became a market for them on the street where you were paying depending on the value of that pill with respect to 8 milligrams, 15, 20, whatever. They were going anywhere from $30 to $60 to $80, the real ones on the street. That by the time the kids got themselves quite handily addicted to them, and mom and dad didn't know, and they would have already stolen everybody blind to the drugs that they had left over in the cupboards, they were starting to buy them off the street from other kids, but then they weren't able to afford them anymore. And they started to become scarce. And then OxyContin, which was a very popular one, was reformulated from pressure from the government so that it could no longer be crushed and snorted. It would turn into a liquid. So then the insurgence of fentanyl, and it has its own meaning and why it came into our world.
And there was no indication that there was any use at that time in terms of his behavior, or, I mean,
there was, yes, there was, Randy. For about the month prior to Kelly dying, there were some signs that something wasn't right with him. But we all came from an era where my kid's smoking pot. I think my son is smoking too much pot. We didn't think that these drugs that are exactly the same and function the same as heroin, and even stronger than heroin. How many of us grew up thinking my kid would be addicted to heroin? It's too many.
Point taken. We're just going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this.